Hello, this is Writers at Work, a podcast for readers and writers about the joys, heartaches, challenges, and satisfaction of the creative writing process. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. My guest on this episode of Writers at Work is author Chris Grabenstein. If you don't know Chris, I can assure you that your kids and their kids do. With his many series for young readers, Mr. Lemoncello, The Smartest Kid, iFunny, Treasure Hunters, some of which were written with James Patterson, Chris has influenced thousands and thousands of young people to become enthusiastic readers. To visit Chris on social media and see photos of how kids respond to his books and characters is to put a smile on your face and have your faith in the future restored. Because of his popularity with young readers, it's easy to forget that Chris broke in as a mystery writer. His debut mystery, TILT-A-WHIRL, won the Anthony Award in 2006 for Best First Novel. He was writing for kids and adults at the same time until 2013, I think. Chris travels extensively to meet young readers. In May, he'll return to Knoxville, he attended the University of Tennessee, to participate in a children's reading festival. He recently returned from Raleigh, North Carolina, where he witnessed the world premiere of his new stage play, Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Reading Rooms. Chris Grabenstein, welcome to Writers at Work.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for inviting me to come. I love writers who work.
Okay. Chris, how many books have you written?
That's interesting. Kids ask me that, and I always tell them, well, I've written about 100, but of those 100, about a little over 80 have been published now.
My goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, I started out doing adult mysteries, and we did about 7 or 8 and 9 maybe in that series, and I did a couple adult thrillers, and then 37 of the kids' books I've done with James Patterson, and then the rest are all mine.
Yeah. So what's your schedule like? What's your writing schedule like?
If I'm being good, I get up, I go for a walk, gotta walk the dog, because that's when you daydream and figure out what you're going to write that day. And I try to write 2,000 new words a day. And I start the day by going over the 2,000 words I wrote the day before, doing a little light edit. Then I move forward 2,000 words. And I found that after 2,000 words, I start getting like sloppy and things start falling apart. So it's 2,000 words a day if I'm being good.
And do you consider yourself to be a disciplined writer?
Oh, yes, very much so. There was a point, not so much now. There was a point when I was doing like working on 2 James Patterson books a month, one of my own. And so I got really disciplined during those years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm a Virgo, so I'm very organized and very disciplined. I think that one of the most important parts about being a writer is sitting down and actually writing.
And approaching it like a job.
Yeah, exactly. And I've got like a little work schedule up on my wall that tells me what projects I'm supposed to be working on this month and which ones I'm supposed to be copy editing and which ones are more about marketing. So I keep it kind of scheduled. Yeah. But you know what I did find, because I was an executive in advertising before I started writing books, is that it doesn't take that much time to really get things done. When I was in advertising, you spent so much time going to meetings, talking about what you were going to do and convincing other people that they should allow you to do it, that you didn't actually get to do much work.
You know, I think when you say to people, or particularly people who want to be writers, when you say to them it's a job, they think we're being critical. But I think I agree with what you just said, Chris. For me, I'm perfectly suited for this job.
Yeah, it's like I don't get distracted easily. There's not any daytime television shows I want to go watch. And I sit down and I do it. Like, actually, during COVID, during lockdown, it's like, well, everyone else is just doing what we've been doing for all these years. Just you get up and you go to work in your little writer's cubbyhole.
Yeah. So the odd question, again, people who aren't writers or aren't yet writers sometimes think this is an odd question, but do you like to write?
Oh, yes, that's my favorite part. I often tell all other authors that you better enjoy the writing part because that's the only part you have any control over, whether it's going to get published, whether it's going to stay exactly the same. So, yeah, I actually love it. I finding out because I'm about ready to start a new project, and I find I'm like a little, I'm not quite ready to dive in, not quite ready to dive in. But once I dive in, it's a lot of fun. I used to be an actor in college and a little bit here in New York City, and to me, when I'm writing, the characters come to life in my head, and they start talking and taking me places, even though I plotted it out completely that I may not have expected them to take me, and I've got to go back and rework my outline, that sort of thing. So I actually love the actual writing.
So you outline.
Yes, I do. Very, again, a lot of it was a product of working on three projects a month.
Mm,
It's like I got to keep it organized. And
yeah,
I found a very valuable tool in the Save the Cat books, which are really done for screenwriting. But when you break it down, it's like, oh yeah, all stories follow this kind of beat structure. And I've actually been using that structure for the past, I think, 11 years now.
how many drafts do you do?
Well, each day it's almost a new draft because I start, doing a little rewriting.
Yes, yes.
It depends on the project. My most popular book is called Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Library. And because that had the word library in the title, my editor was very particular because we knew all librarians in the world would pick it up, and if they didn't like it, they'd put it right back down. So that book I worked on for 2.5 years and rewrote like almost 50% of the entire book 8 different times. In fact, I've got boxes and boxes of all the drafts of that book. Some things stayed the same, but a lot of things changed. So I'm a big believer there's no such thing as good writing, only good rewriting. And other than writing, rewriting is one of my favorite things to do. And I have notes because I guess I like to solve puzzles. And what I found is that editors will make notes, and my job is to figure out what are they really saying. Like,
Right,
I don't have to take their exact suggestions, but I see, okay, you stumbled over that part. Well, how do I make that a little less stumble worthy?
right. I find a certain joy in um, doing a draft and making it significantly better than what it had been before.
Yeah, I
And
love doing that.
and I never feel threatened by that. I always welcome the opportunity to improve the work based on notes from someone who knows.
And me too. So I always tell kids it's like if you're in a choir or if you're in a play or if you're in a sports team, you either have a coach or a director, someone who's on the outside looking at what you're doing and hopefully giving you some encouraging words and also pointing out what you might do better.
Right. And you mentioned earlier about you started out as a mystery writer. Did you read mysteries when you were a kid?
Oh yeah, yeah. That's like all the books I write for kids are mysteries. But I got into the classic Agatha Christie, Sherlock Holmes, all those mysteries when I was a kid. Because as a kid, I was a reluctant reader. I'd like to think I was a super critical reader. I still am a reluctant reader. I only want to read books that get me involved and are packed with action and get like a movie projector going in my brain. And I found as a kid that reading mysteries, it's almost like playing a game where you, as the reader, could maybe possibly figure things out before the characters in the story do.
Did you feel like a world opened up for you? Like let's not even say you were at the library, but maybe with your parents or whoever you're with, and now you have a book in your hand, and you think, ah, this is where I belong. I belong in a world of books.
Yes, and actually, each book would present a world of its own. And I like doing that. I like going into living in someone else's shoes for like 300 pages
Yeah.
and seeing what their world is like.
Actually, when I was a kid, I liked carrying books. I liked having a book.
Well, I grew up at a time, and at least in Tennessee where I grew up, we didn't read books. In the age that I write for mostly now, like the ages 8 to 12, we were reading SRA essays, which were color-coded essays. And
Mm,
so, and Tennessee did not have great public libraries. And so I kind of missed libraries growing up. It's kind of interesting. My library is mostly my dad's thrillers and books like Airport, and that he was like, oh, you can read this one. This one's okay. When I was like a teenager, this one's not too bad. You can read it. So my library is my dad's paperbacks that he would let me borrow.
So you came from a family of readers.
Yes, we did. Yeah, my mom always made us read, even and to this day I annoy my wife because I read the road signs out loud because that's something my mother made us do to practice our reading on a family car trip, Stuckies, next exit. We had to read those things and read the boxes, read the back of that cereal box. Don't just sit there eating your cereal, read your cereal box. Because she was a big believer in education and reading. So we did a lot of it.
What a gift.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, do you remember your favorite mysteries that you read when you were younger?
Yeah, mostly the Agatha Christie's and the Sherlock Holmes.
Hmm.
Those are my favorites. I did not get into Encyclopedia Brown because again, we didn't have those books in growing up in Tennessee. A lot of my friends they say, "Oh, Encyclopedia Brown was the one that I loved." So I guess the comic books count. I read a lot of comic books. And
I think they do count. I
yeah,
think. Did you read Classics Illustrated? Do you remember
I
those?
did. Sometimes those were shortcuts. Like the only books we actually did read in school were things like the Red Badge of Courage, which nothing against the stylings of the 1860s, but I remember getting the Classics Illustrated. One of my friends said, "Here, man, just read this. It's all you need."
No, you point to something. I think again, not to offend great writers of the past, but there's something easier about reading today. There's something more
Yeah.
direct in storytelling, less florid and getting to the point. I'll point out that you, though, were reading books that might have been above your grade level. No, when you were reading Agatha Christie
Yeah.
and Sherlock
Yeah.
Holmes,
I
How,
was. Yeah. Yeah.
how'd you feel? How'd you feel about that?
I thought it was fine. It's like, why don't we read this good stuff in school? And I think I'm also of a generation that a lot of our storytelling we learned through television in the days of like Twilight Zone and Alfred Hitchcock's mysteries, because those were, brilliantly written short stories when you look at it. In fact, one of the kids who I do a lot of Zooms with kids, and one kid, a fifth grader, said, "Did you watch a lot of Twilight Zone episodes when you were a kid?" I said, "Yeah, yes, I did, but how do you even know about that show?" And I guess it's, that so many streamers, they're out there and kids are rediscovering them. So I look back at I look at my early writings. I actually wrote I remember when I was in fifth grade or sixth grade, I wrote a story about how the moon landing was staged in a television studio. And now that's become a big like conspiracy theory. But I wrote this short story that but everyone thought we landed on the moon. But uh-oh, at the end, no, it was all done in the TV studio. I was just trying to write a Twilight Zone episode. I
Sure,
wasn't trying to
sure,
cause trouble.
sure. But there's something encouraging about young people recognizing good writing from decades and decades ago.
Yeah, and those were great storytelling. And that's what I tell kids, if you really want to write stories, study some of those old episodes because, some of the classic Twilight Zones, like the girl who wakes up with a beautiful face after all this plastic surgery and sees herself, says, "No, no, no, how could this be?" And you realize, oh, in her world, everyone's got a pig face. So she, is the ugly one. I said, everything in that episode, that 30-minute episode, which is really like 20 some, is there for a reason. And that's a great, it all leads up to that big twist at the end.
Yeah, yeah. So tell us about how James Patterson came into your life.
Oh, years ago, in 1983, 84, I was doing improvisational comedy in New York City, which was great fun. Bruce Willis was in our troupe before he was Bruce Willis. Robin Williams would drop by and jump up on stage. But the bad part about doing improv, it was all a showcase. You were doing it so agents could come see you and maybe sign you up. And in those days, a funny faced comedian like me, we could maybe get some TV commercials and maybe get an audition for Saturday Night Live. And I got my audition for Saturday Night Live the year that Lorne Michaels wasn't doing it. I think Woody Allen's producer was doing it, and she was looking for stand-up comics as opposed to improv comics. So I kind of my one big chance, the one there was because no sitcoms were being shot in New York in the early 80s. Or yeah, I guess I moved to New York in 79. So it's like, oh, what am I going to? So we got paid $10 a show to do improv.
Oh God.
And I typed all day at Citibank. That's how I made my money. But I go to Citibank, I got a job as a temporary secretary, and then I advanced to some kind of very primitive computer code input back in the days of punch cards. So it's like that's what I would do. On Friday through Sunday, I'd be doing like 6 shows, touring to colleges, being a comedian. Then Monday, I'd have to walk past like 30 Rock and past the CBS headquarters where all my friends who had studied what I studied were going. And it was just miserable. And my late wife, before we got married, she said, you need to find a job where you can be creative every day, or otherwise you're such a responsible little, Virgo that you're going to end up being a banker who does comedy as a hobby on the weekends. And so I started a quest for a creative job, and I had studied advertising a little bit in college, but I had no portfolio. And I went out and I realized I'm up against kids who, first of all, are like 5 years younger than me. And second of all, they spent the last 2 years of their college career putting together a portfolio at some place like the Arts Center in LA or School of Visual Arts here in New York City. So I was up against it and I tried to make a portfolio, and all these really nice people said, here's what you're up against. You seem like you're a talented guy. And fortunately, I started setting up my clippings. We used to get really good New York Times reviews of our improv shows. And a lady at J. Walter Thompson, a former actor herself, called me in and said that, you don't have a portfolio, but the head of my creative department has been sending me to comedy clubs looking for writers because he's tired of all the people coming out of the schools because their work all looks the same. They've all
Right.
got the same teacher and they're doing like a punny headline. And we've written an aptitude test. And so the aptitude test were, I think it was 10 questions, right if you want work. One was, how do you sell a telephone to a Trappist monk who's taken a strict vow of silence? And I wrote about monk mail because in those days, AOL was just getting started and you had to put a phone in a cradle. So I said, the rest of the world's caught up with you. We've stopped talking and started communicating. Introducing monk mail. You just have to do everything on a keyboard, no talking, but you will need a telephone. So anyhow, I did all these 10 questions. To me, it was like doing improv on paper. And James Patterson was the creative director of J. Walter Thompson, who wrote that ad. So he hired me. He got 2,000 people. It ran as a full page ad in the New York Times. 2,000 people entered. I was the first one he hired, which sounds great till I tell you the second guy he hired, my buddy Dan Staley, ended up as a co-executive producer of Cheers. So he did pretty good too. So
So,
Jim,
so
he
no, I'm sorry to interrupt. I wonder if for our younger listeners, we should tell them who James Patterson is.
I sometimes nowadays it used to be they kind of knew he did a lot more kids books than he's doing now.
Right, right.
But when I say, "Do you guys know who James Patterson is?" and I have to tell them he is the number one best-selling author in the history of authors. He's even in the Guinness Book of World Records for having more number one New York Times bestseller than any author who's ever lived. So that's who James Patterson is. But before he wrote books, he wrote advertising and taught me a lot about grabbing attention because in the it was 1984, I got my first advertising job and I stayed in till 1999, 2001, maybe 2001. And our big obstacle, TiVo had not been invented yet, or the DVR, where you can pre-record a show and skip all the commercials by fast forwarding. What we were up against was the remote control. We had to grab the viewer's attention in the first 5 seconds, or they would click the button and move on to the next channel. So we learned a lot about grabbing attention. And what James Patterson taught me writing advertising, he said, always write as if nobody wants to or has to read anything you've written. And to me, that was great advice. And I tell kids now, would you write your homework assignments differently if you knew your teacher didn't have to read those unless you made her want to read them? And they all go, yeah, I think I would. And Patterson did this thing. This is back in the early mid 80s, where advertising agencies still had training programs. And you'd go like once a week and you'd go with account people and media people and you'd be taught some aspect of advertising. And James Patterson came in to, and this is advice I always give writers too, that he came and in those days he had a big bushy beard. I don't know why all the executives at J. Walter Thompson had big bushy beards in 1984, 85. And he came in and he said, all right, I'm going to teach you kids how to make $1 million a year in advertising. The secret is, and before he could say another word, this kind of knucklehead guy came running into this conference room. And we're on Lexington Avenue, the Park Avenue atrium, fancy office building. But this guy comes in with a banana cream pie and slammed it in James Patterson's
Oh
face.
no.
And all this cream and frosting and crust is caught in the hairs of his beard, dripping down. And me and my friends were like, oh, that guy's so fired. I can't believe he did that. He's so fired. James cleaned himself up a little bit. He said, okay, I just showed you how to make $1 million a year in advertising. Throw a pie in their face, and once you have their attention, say something smart. So
Oh my.
so you'll notice that every book I've written, except my first mystery, because I didn't quite know, I didn't trust myself, but it kind of had. But they all start with a pie in the face. If you grab your reader's attention in that first chapter, in that first sentence, in that first paragraph, with something that makes them go, "What?" They will stick around, and you can do all the exposition later. You can peel the onion later. Because I noticed a lot of mysteries. One year I was judging, I guess, the Edgar's paperback editions. And somebody was teaching all their writers to like, let's do a quick recap of the 6 books in this series to bring you up to speed. It's like, no, hit me with a pie in the face and you can bring me up to speed later, you know?
Yeah.
I want to get this plane off the ground and then you can tell me about the comfortable cruising altitude we're going to reach.
Yeah. You know, I may have this wrong, but I think you wrote mysteries for adults at the same time you began your career writing for young readers.
Well,
That
I
is,
started out, I did, I think I wrote 6 of my CPAT books and a couple of my thrillers. And I have 24 nieces and nephews who could not read any of those things because there's some language and adult stuff in those that kids should not read till they're 27 years old. But one of my books that got rejected because I spent 4 years, you know, getting everything I wrote rejected and sent back. But one of them was a ghost story. And my agent was at some kind of cocktail party, and there was an editor going, has anyone got ghost stories for middle grade readers? And my agent said, well, this guy Chris I work with wrote a ghost story, but it's not for middle grade readers. And this editor said, well, if it's any good, we could turn it into one.
ah,
So he read the book and he said, yeah, yeah, get rid of all the adult language, adult situations, and cut it from, I think it was 110,000 words, cut it from 110,000 words down to 50,000 words. And my agent said, that's a lot of work. Do you want to do that? And I said, yes, I do, because I have all these nieces and nephews. And it was in that process of doing that rewriting. And all I did is I went out and I read, like, Carl Hyacin wrote a book called Hoot for kids. And I think I reread Harry Potter. And I read a book by a guy named Louis Sacker called Holes. And I was like, okay, I think I see how this goes. And I remembered all the Mad magazines I loved as a kid. And I started writing this book, and I had more fun writing that book than any other. So, of course, the long story short is when I get done doing all this work, you know, that editor who was looking for ghost stories, he wasn't looking for them anymore.
no. Oh
But with
no.
my wife, JJ, and I, we don't have any kids, but we borrowed our friend Kath and Dave's kids, Sam and Megan. And we said, can you guys read this book and tell us what you like and what you don't like? And they read it, they loved it, and they were running around. They go to a Unitarian church, and they were running around their church one day and say, we read the best book, we read the best book. And it turns out the head of HarperCollins Children's Books goes to that same Unitarian congregation. And she said to my buddy Dave, who's a FDNY chief, you know, a very gregarious kind of guy. What's this book? He said, oh, my buddy Chris wrote the best book. The kids loved it better than any book they've ever read. And so all of a sudden, this HarperCollins calls my agent. They want to read it. And my agent uses that to call up Random House, where he has a friend, and says, yeah, HarperCollins is looking at this ghost story. And that became my first kids book ever. Was a rewrite of one of my rejected books. Random House did it, but Harper actually asked me to write a series for them later, which I did. So yeah, so those kids got the book dedicated to them because they're the ones who put me over the top.
Right. Now, Chris, people who hear that story would say you were lucky.
Yes.
However, it's very funny because we just talked to another author the other day and talked about the very same subject. You positioned yourself to receive luck.
Yeah, I always say I'm fortunate. I'm not lucky. Lucky means you just throw the dice and see what happens. Fortunate is you've done all your work and you've gotten, I did all that my research. How do I write for kids? I made sure the kids liked it. I practiced my craft, doing all the murder mysteries and things. So yes, when the opportunity uh, happenstance, when the stars aligned, I was ready. So
Right,
that's the
exactly.
part that and the same thing with my first adult mystery. Uh, the editor was actually reading. I think this one that was a thinly veiled autobiography about an advertising man whose wife is dying of cancer, which was kind of my story. And he was liking it. He goes, "Yeah, this is great, but we're not looking for this right now." If he ever writes a mystery, though, they've charged me with upgrading our mystery list, getting some more modern voices in here. And I had just finished writing Tilt-A-Whirl.
Mm,
So my agent, so again, that's fortune, because I put in some dues, having 3 years, and I went to every class I could. I studied some fiction at Marymount. Used to have a really great Grace Edwards, another mystery author, ran a class there. I took her class, and she helped me workshop the mystery I was working on. I still remember. Chris, this is the first dead body this young boy's ever seen, right? Yes. Don't you think he'd throw up or something? She gave me some great notes and that was a good workshopping experience. So yeah, I was always like doing my homework and being prepared. The old
yeah,
Scout motto, be prepared.
yeah. And did you feel like you were having to wear two different hats? And if so, was it difficult to shift from writing for younger readers and then writing for adults, or did you see it as just one big kind of career?
There was actually it was interesting because Rick Riordan wrote kind of murder mysteries before he became up with Percy Jackson. So I would look to him and I saw he's not really pushing his early murder mysteries that much. But on the other hand, James Patterson's got everything. But then one day, to be economical in my promotion, I made a two-sided bookmark. On one side was my stuff for my adult books, and the other side were the kid books, the ghost stories that I was coming up with. And I realized I was sending kids home with a bookmark that said Hellhole on one side. Because I think that's the fifth book in the CPAC series, might be the fourth book. And that was the period I was doing it. And then CPAC, my adult mysteries, unfortunately, Carol and Graff, which was a great publisher, they did my first two thrillers, my first, I think, three CPACs. Yeah, I'm looking around the back to my bookcase. But they were taken out of business when their holding company said we're not going to do fiction anymore. And then somebody picked me up, St. Martin's, but the editor who picked me up left St. Martin's and I was orphaned there. And so I did two books with St. Martin's, but I could tell the second one was just like, yeah, we are contractually obligated to do this kind of feeling. And then I to keep CPAC alive, I did a short story for Alfred Hitchcock. And then somebody who had been at Carol and Graff started their own imprint, and that's where my last three CPAC books were done. But by that point, the 2013 when Mr. Lemoncello's Library came out, and also some of the books I did with James Patterson were now all of a sudden number one bestsellers because, as I told you, he's the number one, but he's had more number one bestsellers than anybody in the world. So some of my books now for kids are becoming number one bestsellers. And Mr. Lemoncello's Library comes out, and it went into a second printing before the book even came out. And it was kind of like, okay, I think I'm going to focus on kids now. And I've had so much fun doing that. I haven't really gone back to trying to write for adults again.
You have to believe in yourself, though, Chris. I mean, you know, to take a chance even if you have the support of someone like Jim Patterson, um, you send your career off in a different direction, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
risk there.
Yeah, there is, because with Jim, you never know. He said, "Yeah, if we have fun, we'll do another one." It's like you never know if you're going to do another one.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we did 37 with him, so we had some fun.
You mentioned Rick Riordan.
Right.
Many years ago, Rick and I were having dinner, um, and I said to him, "So what's next for you?" And he started describing what became Percy Jackson and the
Ah,
Olympians. And I remember my reaction was, I don't get it. I don't see it. This guy has a good career going, and he's going to take this risk.
yeah,
Well, that was my shortcoming. That was my inability to share his vision. And of course, as we know, he persevered.
yeah,
And I mean, again, writers we know can be deterred rather easily. The way you fought for your books. We know other writers who might have said, "No, I don't think I want to do that," or
yeah.
"Oh no, that's too hard," or "I don't have a vision." I guess my point is, once you decide to do it, you have to do it. You have to do it with a full commitment to doing it.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes from my days of doing improv, which the whole rule of doing improv, you say yes, and like you take a risk. You say yes to whatever your scene partner gave you, and you move it forward. And then I also, I think my years in advertising also help because you get rejected more times per day in advertising than any other kind of writing. I mean, you'll work in your little room and you and your partner will come up with like 50 scripts and your boss will kill 25 of them. The account people will kill 10 of them. Then you'll go to the client and he'll kill all of them. And then you got to go back and you got to start again and you got to do 25 and go through that process again. And then the client will kill all of them. And I remember like I did a lot for Miller Lite back when I was in advertising, and we'd fly out to Milwaukee and they'd kill everything. And we'd fly back. And after like the third round, all my friends were going, ah, man, that's it. I'm done. I'm not gonna buy anything ever. I'm getting out. I'm gonna go work on something else. And I'd always say, well, there's one more. There's one more script. We could do another one. Come on. And yeah, I just had that perseverance. And I guess I like the challenge of can I do it? What is the puzzle? How do I translate this kind of Stephen Kingish ghost story into something that kids might like? And it turned out great. In fact, that
Yeah.
book's going to be reissued again.
Is it?
Yeah, it's going to come. Horror stories with kids are popular, then they're not. Then they're popular, then they're not. And I guess they're popular again right now. And so they're going to reissue them with covers that look more like the other kind of scary books that are being done right now.
Yeah. So you began the Mr. Lemoncello series in 2013, I think. How did that come about?
I was doing the ghost stories and I went to a school. I started doing a lot of school visits. When you write for kids, you'd go to schools a lot. And typically your day starts in the library or the media center, as they sometimes call it now. They don't seem to be doing that as much as they did back in the 2013, 14. Uh, and so all of a sudden I'm meeting all these librarians in the libraries, like the coolest place in the school where it's fun. And kids come in and they say, "Oh, I read this book last night. It was great. Oh, if you like that one, you'll read these." And I started wondering where were all these fun librarians when I was a kid? Because I remember the few libraries I did go to were like, "Shh, be quiet, young man. You'll wake up the books, or get your sticky fingers off the books, young man." And then one day I did a school visit. It's funny that ends up that a member of the PTA ends up being my editor many years later. But at the time, she wasn't my editor at Random House, but her kids were there. And I went to this school in Brooklyn, New York, PS10, and it looked like every other school in Brooklyn, 3 or 4 stories tall, been there since 1932. And as writers, we're always looking for something out of the ordinary because nobody wants to read nice stories about nice people having a nice day. So, but I go into the school and I say, well, there won't be any ideas for stories here, but we'll have fun. But upstairs, they had a brand new library. It was like ultra modern with light fixtures, computers, bright murals on the walls. I remember the bookcases were filled with books and they had like quotes, famous quotes engraved. And I said to the librarian, "Wow, how'd you guys get this brand new library in your otherwise old-fashioned building?" And she said, "Oh, a very generous millionaire donated it to us." So that day on the subway ride home, I used to carry little note cards. Now I have my iPhone. And I wrote down, "What if a very generous and slightly eccentric bazillionaire game maker donated a library to the town where he grew up?" And that's how the whole thing got started. So I tell kids that's how you start a story is with a what if. And then you drop that pebble into the pond and you watch all the ripples go out from there.
Now, earlier you said you didn't have a library in your hometown.
Yeah,
Um,
I would have some eventually in school. I remember my Catholic high school, we had a library that was run by a very strict nun. And every now and then, I think I would go to the Chattanooga Public Library. That was kind of a scary place. So I had I knew of them. I didn't
yes,
frequent them.
but is Mr. Lemoncello's library kind of your dream library?
Oh yeah, it's everybody's dream library. I mean, it's kind of a library where you go to Disney World and there's holograms and there's hover ladders that take you up to the book. You type in the code of the book you're looking for, and the hover ladder will take you up to find that book. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. Kids always say, "I wish our library could be like that." And the fun over the 7 books, most of them take place in the library. One of them is a prequel, and one takes place in the town where Mr. Lemoncello makes all of his games. But some of the fun's been adding to the libraries.
Yeah.
There's a roller coaster kind of that carries books from down in the stacks up to the reading room, and they get to ride on that roller coaster. It's a lot of fun to make up. And then there's the Fictionasium, where you get to go in wearing sort of a motion capture suits and become characters inside a story. And that's a lot of fun.
Oh, I bet. I bet.
Yeah.
What was the reaction uh, of your readers when Mr. Lemoncello's fantabulous finale uh, came out and it appeared that that was going to be the end of things?
People, I think, it's interesting. There's a conflict that runs through the first 7 books between Kyle Keeley, who's our hero, and
Mhm.
Charles Chiltington. Even in the prequel, I have like Chiltington's grandparents are being mean to Luigi when he's a kid. So I think people were done with that arc. So what we started thinking was, what the world though can still exist, and that's why we're coming out with the Christmas novella, which is fun. I actually wrote a different Christmas story because I'm a big believer. I love like It's a Wonderful Life, and I reread A Christmas Carol every year, and because I just love the magic and the message of that stuff. And I wrote one, and my editor at Random, I said, "This is really good, but what if we did a Christmas story in the Lemoncello world?" And so I
Mm.
sort of took one of the characters I created for uh, that standalone and brought him into the Lemoncello world. But again, I guess I could have said, "No, this is the one I wrote, and if you don't want to do this, I'm not doing anything." So it's that word "no" that gets you in trouble as a writer.
Yeah. We remember what happened to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle when he decided to kill off
Yeah.
Sherlock Holmes. Um, let us just say readers didn't tolerate it, and
Right.
suddenly Sherlock Holmes was came back to life.
And I
Um,
created a new puzzle mystery series that Ms. Pennypickle, who's a little bit more of a recluse, not quite as gregarious and a showman as Mr. Lemoncello. She's more mysterious, likes to wear costumes all the time and show up in strange places. And those are fun. The kids are liking those now too, the puzzle quest. Because what kids really like are the puzzle mysteries, because inside the Lemoncello books and the Ms. Pennypickle books, there are puzzles that you, the reader, can solve along the way. And I always like to have the kids in the story. "Oh, I don't know what that is. Well, it could be this." Like you vamp a little bit so the kids reading can figure it out before the kids in the book do.
yeah, yeah. So I mentioned in the introduction about the Mr. Lemoncello play, Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's reading rooms.
Right.
How did that come about?
Well, I did a play. Some friends of mine in Knoxville I went to college with started a children's theater, so I wrote a play for them called Curiosity Cat, which was based on a character in my ghost stories, a children's book character that the hero's stepmother writes. And that was a fun as a writer. I tell you, there's nothing better because if you write funny stuff, you're sitting here at home going, "Oh, this is funny, I bet." And maybe a year later, someone said, "I read your book; it was funny," but you weren't there. There's nothing better than being in the audience of a play where they're laughing where you hoped they would laugh. So that was fun. And then I wrote another book called The Island of Dr. Libris. And when that came out, a lot of the schools I went to, the teachers would put together a reader's theater presentation where the kids play. Because in that book, a boy, by the power of his imagination, can go to an island where characters he's reading about come to life, like the Three Musketeers and Tom Sawyer's out there, and Hercules and Antaeus from Greek mythology, and the Sheriff of Nottingham. And the fun there, it's kind of like an improv game where you mix up all sorts of different styles. So you have Hercules battling the Three Musketeers, and it's fun. But these kids all wanted to do that, so a buddy of mine from college and we wrote a stage play of that. But for years, I know kids would love to play the characters they love from Mr. Lemoncello's library, but it's so complicated. It's such a, like I was telling you, there's holograms, there's hub
Yes,
ladders,
yes.
there's like, how do you do that on a stage in a set that a middle school could afford to do? And I was playing around with an idea for younger readers in the Lemoncello world, where it would be an escape room. It would be almost like a picture book where you could look and there'd be clues hidden in the escape room. But I said, nah, we don't want to do that because kids look forward to reading Mr. Lemoncello when they're in third, fourth, fifth grade. And if you made it something that you read in first and second grade, it wouldn't be cool anymore. But I said, but that might be the way to do the play is instead of
Ah,
escaping from the whole library, what if there were two side by side reading rooms? They have the exact same, like escape rooms always have props and things in them. So these two rooms side by side have the same props, and I could bring the characters. So Charles Chiltington is the villain who says Chiltingtons never lose, and he comes from money. In the play, he has a butler who he bribes people to join his team with the promise of free milkshakes delivered by his butler. And then there's Kyle and all of his friends that kids love from the books. I said, this would be a great way to let the kids play their favorite characters, and Mr. Lemoncello's there and Dr. Zinchenko, but have it in a contained space. So it's fun. It's like an hour long, one act play, two side by side rooms with a lot of the kind of tricks. I've gone to a couple escape rooms to do research, some of the things that they have in escape rooms, and the kids down there loved it. So that was fun.
so will we see it elsewhere?
Well, once my agent contacts the publishing companies, hopefully, yes, knock on wood, somebody will pick it up, and then schools everywhere can do it.
Gotcha. So what's next for you, Chris?
Well, I got the Lemoncello Holiday book is coming out this fall, Second Ms. Penny Pickle. My wife JJ and I do some fun books for, I call it the kindergarten through second grade, third grade crowd. Those are like 8,000 words long and heavily illustrated. The Stinky stories, all about a stuffed skunk who lives on a bookshelf in a library. And when all the grown-ups leave, the kids know if they don't like the way a story ends, they can go to the skunk, Stinky, and he'll help them use their imaginations to come up with a whole new ending. So we've got a new one, Cinder Smella's, coming out in May, which is all about like, well, what happened? The kids don't like the fact that she got bullied by her stepsisters and stepmother, and then you never see the stepsisters getting their just desserts in most versions of the book. In the original Grimm fairy tale, I believe they cut their feet off to fit inside the glass slipper, so they do have some payback. So we play around a little bit with that, and it's fun. And then we have Stinking Beauty will be coming out in the fall. And then there's some other things that my agent and I were talking to Random House. I think there's going to be a new standalone, maybe, and there might be some more graphic novels coming out, original graphic novels, but none of that's definite yet.
My guest is the talented, imaginative Chris Grabenstein, one of the most popular authors for young readers. Chris, thanks so much for invigorating the next generation of readers and for joining us on Writers at Work.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. This was a lot of fun.
Writers at Work is a production of Bliss Publications. Erin Mitchell is our producer. Music is by Joni Mitchell, performed by Keith Jarrett. For more, see writersatworkpodcast.com. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. Until next time, happy reading.